So what is a migraine?
So I'm glad you asked this. So I actually had something happen last week where I was going to talk to some med students about migraines. And I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint. I got a neurologist friend. And so I asked him, hey, can you send me over a slide deck so I can talk to these guys about migraines and headaches and that kind of stuff. He sent it on over, and there's about 500 slides. And I thought, well, surely some of these are repeats. They were not. It was a whole week of slides talking just about headaches. And I contacted him and I said, hey, I don't actually need all of these things. Let's just talk about headaches. I don't need to talk about tension headaches. I don't need to talk about cluster headaches. I don't need to talk about any of these other kind of headaches. And he goes, oh, no, those are each their own separate 500 slide decks, 500 PowerPoints. So the headaches, there are textbooks, there are fellowships. People spend years learning about headaches. That is way beyond the scope of this. So we're not really going to talk about the pathophysiology and how these headaches come about. We're going to talk about a couple simple ones. We're going to talk about cluster headaches. We're going to talk about tension headaches. We're going to talk about migraines. Okay, those seem to be the most common on out there. We're not really going to talk about how they happen or anything like that. We're going to talk about what the VA cares about and what makes them a disability. So first of all, tension headaches. Most of you guys have had them. It seems like you get a headache in the back of your head. It's usually caused by stress, caused by something, a little dehydration, not getting enough caffeine, some of those other things like that. You get kind of a headache.
Personally, I get them when my wife talks a lot. So.
Exactly. We've all had tension headaches. So I've got my kids here, and so I know what you're talking about. Cluster headaches. Cluster headaches are really a unique kind of headache. They're incredibly painful. They usually last for about 30 minutes. They usually happen in males. Cluster headaches, if you've got one, you know what they are. Migraines are one of those other things too. So all migraines are headaches, but not all headaches are migraines. So migraines are one of those things. A lot of times people will get this aura. They'll start to get this kind of like visual disturbance before they get these headaches. They're usually very sensitive to sound and to light and smells, those kind of things like that. They can cause vomiting, nausea. They can cause different things. Whenever you see it on TV, if you're not one of these people who has migraines, whenever you see somebody on TV and they're like sitting in a dark room with the shades drawn and they're curled up in a fetal position, that's a migraine usually. And so we don't diagnose. That's one of the things that we do as medical examiners. We don't diagnose. We do in our own private practice. We do when we're outside of the disability scope. But we don't diagnose. So when you come to us, you bring us your records, and your records will have it diagnosed. And so you'll either be diagnosed with a tension headache, with a migraine, with a cluster headache, or you'll get something like a post-traumatic headache, something like that. But you'll have the diagnosis, you'll come to us. And so we're going to take it from there because we're not going to talk about how we diagnose it and all that other stuff. But there's usually two types of treatment for headaches. Not going into specific medicine classes, but could you tell me just a little bit about like a preventative medication and an abortive medication, just kind of what the strategy is there?
Yeah, so like you said, there's two, obviously you can prevent headaches, or you can take an abortive medication to treat the headache after you get it. And pretty much everyone at some point in their life has probably taken an abortive medication, right? Ibuprofen, Tylenol when they have a headache, right? One time in Thailand, I thought I was dying, and I thought I had a migraine, because the night before I had a little too much, but I took some ibuprofen. So that's an abortive medication, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of usually our first line, right? NSAIDs like ibuprofen. And then there's other medications along those lines like Imitrex, right? Other things we use for migraines. If you have enough headaches or enough migraines, so you're getting them frequently and you're having to take a lot of abortive medications or missing a lot of time at work, you're having severe headaches, then we'll put you on a prophylactic or preventative medication. There's a whole wide range of them, from injectable medications to pills to even Botox.
Yeah, and that's way beyond the scope of this right here. But those are the two types of theories behind it. So how do you diagnose it? Somebody thinks that they have headaches. Obviously, you're going to get an MRI or a CT scan, right?
First thing, no. So that's the kind of a misconception.
So how do you diaggnose headaches?
So patient will come in and tell me they have a headache,
yeah.
And so that's the important thing. Everyone says, "Oh, I have a headache," right? And it's really important to kind of look at your headache and say, where is it at? What does it feel like? Because not all two headaches are the same,
yeah.
right? So ask them questions about their headache, what brought it on, how often they're happening, right? And very rarely do patients actually need a CT or an MRI, right? And that's kind of a misconception too. I think some people think, well, everyone has headaches, right? But if you get headaches frequently and having to take medication, it's definitely, put that as a claim. So.
Yeah. So when I get when I get their medical records and I get them and I get assigned a patient to talk to them about their disability claim, I'm going to take all the medical records. I'm going to review it all, try to figure out their service treatment records, try to figure out when they first started having migraines. Sometimes people will tell me, hey, I was in Iraq and I got hit in the head. Now I've had headaches, and so that's kind of a post-traumatic. And so I try to look for that event. Other times people will say, hey, I'm a fueler. I was exposed to fumes, and now I got headaches. And so we'll try to look for a link. We'll try to see what's going on. Try to see if they were treated while they were on military, or if they weren't treated in the military. See if there was something that happened on the military service that caused it. I interview the veteran. Say, hey, why don't you tell me a little bit about your headache? Where's it at? Left, right? Is it on both sides? Does it keep you from going to work? I do a full history and do an interview, and then I write a medical opinion. The VA will ask me a very specific question about the headache. A lot of times what they'll say is, does a veteran have service treatment records that reflect that he had migraines while on active duty, or she had migraines? And so that's an easy question. It's either kind of a yes or a no, and we kind of write that. Or they'll say, does one of their other claims, one of their other things like their back pain, does their allergies, does their obstructive sleep apnea, does something else, did it cause their headaches? And so those are a little bit harder, and that's kind of what we do as medical examiners. We try to figure out, we look at the medical literature out there, try to find a cause and try to find a link, and we determine whether or not we think that the military caused that headache. So, when you get these things, has anything kind of surprised you, like with these claims? What usually does the person have to have in their record for you to try to service connect these headaches?
Generally speaking, headaches are, at some point in time, if they were seen for a headache, and I can link it to another condition, right? Because allergies, like you said, is super common, right? So in general, at some point in time, everyone's seen for a headache, right?
Yeah.
So as long as I can find some sort of record of a headache, and if I'm trying to make it service connected, tie it to something, right?
Yeah.
And it's usually fairly easy, right?
Yeah. What kind of things do you normally see tied to headaches?
Allergies is very common, like you said, post-traumatic or head injury, TBIs.
Yeah.
Hypertension is one you don't really think about, or even PTSD, psychiatric or mental health disorders. Those are some big ones. What else?
Well, so for me, I get headaches sometimes when I get tinnitus, and so that's another thing too. Hearing damage, hearing problems can cause headaches as well. And so we get that. The important thing to remember though is that while you might have had a headache while you were on active duty at some point in time, there's a little bit of a difference between like an acute headache where, hey, because everybody gets them, you get dehydrated or you exercise a little too hard or something happens, and then having these chronic headaches and stuff like that. And so what will happen is I usually try to look for an event, and I try to see, is it reasonable? Does the guy have hypertension? Does the guy have something like that? And then if the sailor or the airman or the soldier has something inside the record that I can tie it to, I'm usually, headaches are one of those things that I don't need you to prove to me that you've got a headache. I don't need somebody to come in there. I don't need somebody crying in the middle of a migraine at that time. Take your medication. It's all history. I know we've all had headaches, and I trust you, and I think most medical examiners are like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's not hard to connect those headaches and stuff there, especially if something was to happen while you were on there. And so sometimes, though, we haven't really talked about this before, but sometimes I have to deny claims, and there's nothing that I can do about it. Sometimes the VA will ask a very specific question, and I can't do anything about it. Sometimes they'll ask something like, they're service connected for asthma because they have asthma. And then they'll say something like, does the veteran's migraines, are they secondary to their asthma? Well, I mean, I can try to walk the dog, and I can try to bring, try to bring those two conditions in. But sometimes the VA just asks the bad question because the claim is filed poorly. And I have to say, no, the two conditions are not the same. You have asthma, you have headaches. I know you have both, but they're asking, is the headache secondary to that? So sometimes, unfortunately, the question just comes up and we have to deny it.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing too. I usually always ask veterans, do you know why you're here? And majority of the time it's they told me to come here.
Yeah.
And so they don't know the question, like you said, for example, if the file was claimed as are your asthma triggering your headaches, right, or your migraines, I could do 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon there and try my best, but, I have to answer the question they ask me, so.
Yeah, and so I know this is a little bit of a side note, but I'd like to talk to you about one veteran. I'm not going to, use his name or anything like that, but one veteran that I talked to, he a helicopter crashed, and so it crashed over in Afghanistan, and he had this horrible back pain, and they sent it to me, and the VA asked me, was his back pain related to his service-connected migraines? And I said, well, no, his migraine didn't cause his back pain. So I told the veteran, I said, hey, just so you know, they're asking this question. I'm going to have to deny it. And so he went and appealed it. And then the next appeal came back and said, is the guy's tinnitus, is his back pain secondary to his tinnitus? And I was like, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. I said, you need to go back. They're not asking the right question. So then I got it a third time, and the third time says, did his service time in Afghanistan cause his back injury, which clearly it did. And so at that point in time, we can do it. So sometimes we have to deny claims, and it's not our fault. And it's not the veteran's fault. It's just a poorly asked question. So that is the migraines. We trust you that you do have migraines or headaches. We know you do, but sometimes claims just get denied because the question isn't properly phrased.
Yeah.
So that's migraines, that's headaches, that's cluster headaches, that's tension headaches, that's all that stuff. So yeah.
Giving me a headache.
Yeah, exactly. So now is the point in time where we're gonna have my daughter. We have Lily Weipert. She's gonna come on up here. She's gonna ask us a question so you guys can get to know us just a little bit better. There is your question. Why don't you pick one out for us?
What encouraged you to become a doctor?
Ooh, that's a good one. I went first the last 2 times. You want to be on the spot, or you want me to go?
I guess I'll answer that. So I kind of always was interested in biology and anatomy and kind of sciences. I was awful at English, I don't read or write so good. And I've always liked the sciences. And then my grandpa was actually a pilot in World War II. And I kind of always thought that was cool. So that's kind of why I became a flight surgeon. But I always liked science and medicine and helping people. And so that's kind of why I became a doctor. And then that's why I became a flight surgeon. So.
Okay. So I always wanted to be a doctor too, ever since I was a little kid. But I went into the military as a pilot, and so I was flying reconnaissance airplanes. And my roommate happened to be an ER doc, and so one day I came on over to go talk to him and kind of hang out. And I kind of knew, I kind of found medicine enjoyable, but he gets on over there and we're just talking, and all of a sudden we start hearing these helicopters come on in. These Blackhawks are coming on in, and he goes, holy cow, this is a big one. And so he goes, I'm gonna need your help. And so I was like, well, I'm like a pilot, like you don't really want me doing anything. And so they came on in there, and there had been an attack, and there had been a bunch of Iraqis that had been attacked, the Iraqi army, and then there had been some insurgents and some Americans. And so they bring the Americans on over to one side, and they're working on it, and then they bring the Iraqis over to another side from the Iraqi army, and then there's one guy who was the actual insurgent who did it. And so they just literally didn't have enough people, and so they said, hey, we're gonna need some help. Can you go cut this guy's clothes off? Can you start doing this? Can you start an IV? And I was like, well, I don't know if you want me doing that stuff. And so they kind of walked me through it as they're trying to save these lives. And so I'm over there, I'm cutting off clothes, getting tourniquets out of the way. And admittedly, I almost passed out about 3 times, almost threw up all over the place. It was a little bit traumatic for me. And so finally, some guy came over and said, hey, you don't have to be here if you don't want to. And I was like, no, I want to help out. And so we did all this stuff. And then eventually they take him on down to go get his leg amputated. And the ER doc was like, hey, do you want to go with him? And I was like, yeah, heck, I want to go with them. And so they have this surgical sawzall that they're cutting this guy's leg off. And I'm holding the leg as he's cutting it off. And finally, the leg comes off. I'm sitting there holding it in my hand. I'm covered in blood, everything like that. And I said, I'm going to med school. I'm done with this. And so that was the last time. I mean, I kept flying for a couple of years. It took me a little while, but that was the day where I was like, I no longer want to be a pilot. I want to be a doctor. So.
Your story's a lot better than mine, so I just gotta say, it sounds like my typical Friday night, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a little bit more about us. We're the disability doctors. We're trying to put these series on so we can help veterans. That's the whole point. In order to get these series on out out there and to get more people to watch these and get them made. We need people to click, like, and subscribe. So do that. Go to the website, the Disability Doctors. It'll be down there in the link. Yeah, email us.
Yeah, if any other topics or questions that you have or things you want us to cover, feel free to email us.
Yeah, there's lots of topics out there. Yeah, hopefully we'll make a video for every single topic. We'll see how that goes. And so some of them are a little bit more high yield, some of them are a little bit more popular, and so we're going to start with those first. But let us know, email us, and say, hey, I'd like to know more about this. Yeah. So we're the Disability Doctors, and thanks for coming along with us as we talked about migraines and headaches.